All thought is the past. Thought is the past, and the past only exists as thought. The past has no existence except as thought. Thought about the future is thought about the past imagined to happen in a time later. Thought or no thought isn't really the issue. Not no thought and thought are states. Something that can come and go is not what he spoke about. It's not what he means. The problem is with words and language. All language and words are a kind of means to an end, and skillfully bringing someone from this conceptual understanding to a place where they can go beyond concepts. And sometimes you have to use a concept to help get rid of a concept. What comes and goes is changeable. The self is not something that changes. Satsang is not about a thought-free state. Satsang is about understanding or seeing, not intellectual understanding, but recognizing that the blackboard itself is always the blackboard, and it's always just the blackboard. It's unchanged, even if on the surface of the blackboard there is some white chalk mark on it. That the blackboard itself never changes, and it's always inherently empty. What Papaji is always pointing to is that which is aware of thought and that which is aware of no thought. It's just that when people are in a continual state of thinking and attaching to thinking, they don't recognize that which is there in between thoughts. And that same thing that's there in between thoughts is there at the same exact moment when there is thought. The only thought-free state Papaji was talking about is the thought-free state in which sometimes there's no thoughts arising and sometimes there are thoughts arising. If he talked about anything else, it was just to get you to see the underlying blackboard. He might say this, he might say that, but he's going there. That's what he's pointing to. He was only always pointing to the sky. So sometimes he would say the empty sky or the pure sky, but he wasn't really saying that it couldn't have any clouds in it. It's empty whether it has clouds or it doesn't have clouds. The sky is always empty, always pure, always untouched. Thoughts or noise or whatever happens in you, but it happens in quiet. And there is nothing that can contaminate that quiet. There's nothing you can do to be that quiet. You are that quiet. And there's nothing you could do to make that quiet go away. And the very thought of you is sound in that quiet. It's not that there's you and you have thought. There's thought and then there's I thought. And they're both sound arising in the silence that is, that you could say we are, although there's no we. You could say you are, although there's no I or you, except as sound, except as another thought or sensation. So sensations and thoughts, emotions arise in the silent space, the silent aware space that we are. But that we are part is just for the sake of reassurance. It's really a bit of nonsense. The forms themselves are appearances in the space. But its nature is empty space. And then there's a little adventure where parts of it condenses and you can actually see a mist, and sometimes it becomes water and all of that stuff. But that's just the activity of the sky itself. And that includes the I sense. It isn't that there's an I that's emptiness. It isn't that there's an I that has thoughts. It isn't that there's an I that has a silent mind. The I is thought, it is mind. But you know, how else are you going to talk about this? So it's correct when you say that's what I am. I mean that because it's pointing to the sense of that's the bottom line, that's the identity. But it's not the identity of anybody in particular. Kind of all teaching is helping the mind to relax, so some insight into the nature of what is already the case can happen. It's not to change you, right? If you recognize thought for thought, then you're free. It's free. The freedom is in recognizing what thought, the nature of mind, the nature of mind, and then mind is fine. It can be no mind or mind, and it's fine. You know, it's again, it's sort of like it's a more restful state. And so then there is a tendency to slow down, there's a tendency to become meditative. All of that's there too. But it's not as a means to an end. But see, if this remains intellectual, then then it's good to meditate and to watch thought and to just be quiet and all of that. So that's why Papaji says, I tell you to just be quiet, to appraise you of the fact that you're quiet itself. So there's a whole traditions of quieting the mind, but you should recognize that that is not that the thought-free state is the goal. The thought-free state is easy to see. Oh, underlying mind is consciousness, is Buddha nature, is peace, is what is. And then whether mind is there or not, the recognition of that peace can continue. Or if it doesn't, and you find yourself mixed up in thought and believing in thought, or another way of saying it, if there's a you, an I thought, that is identifying with thoughts of the past, which is really past thought, identifying with more past thoughts, because the I itself is a past thought. Then you so when you see that, you're going to get beat up a bit. In other words, there'll be an experience of suffering, and then the recognition of that is you can pick up the sword of discrimination, and in that moment, what is aware of thought? And you could use the word I, but the point is it's not the person I, it's the awareness of the person I. So it's not Krishna Gauci who is aware of thoughts. The awareness of the thought Krishna Gauci and the thoughts that Krishna Gauci is identified with is what's aware. That's why usually the way this is expressed is to say that the self or the Atman is impersonal. That's what it means. It means that it's aware of the personhood. It's not personal or impersonal, but it isn't the person. It's the awareness of the person and the person's thoughts. Because one of the traps that's so easy to fall into in spiritual, this kind of thing, is to identify with the person trying to slow down thoughts or see through thoughts, and that's okay. First stage, that's fine. I'm aware that my mind is quieter. And then Papaji said, well, what's aware? What do you mean I am aware? And oh, because if it's like I have a more noisy mind now, and I have a more this, then there's an identification. It's speaking from the identification of a particular idea of oneself that sometimes is this and sometimes is that. Sometimes has a clear mind, sometimes has a noisy mind. That's fine. That's like, it's, we could say it's step one, but it isn't non-duality, because it's still an I that is in dualistic relationship to thoughts or no thoughts. It's like there's an I, and then there's thoughts and no thoughts, and I'm trying to get to a no thought place as I. But when there's awareness of, oh, that I is also an object, then what's aware is inherently free. The awareness of that is by nature inherently free. And it's not that it became free, it is inherently free. But the person who has thoughts of sometimes an empty mind, sometimes, that person is never free. Right? It might have a temporary reprieve. Oh, no thought. How great. But then it's worried. Oh, the thoughts will come back again. Look for yourself now and see that the only past you have is in thought. You have to bring up a thought, and the you is a thought as well. Has the you has a thought of the past, and that's what the past is. And when does that happen? It only happens now. It only happens now. This now is the only thing that Papaji ever was pointing to. This now. This now is the same thing as this here. You've only ever been here. You're always only here, and you're only always now. It's not that you're located here. You are here. Here is you. You are now. Now is you. Now is just another word for the self. Here is just another word for the self. Of course, they're words that come from dualistic language, but understood immediately, looking where the word is pointing to, or looking where the finger is pointing to, rather than the finger. So this word now, it's indicating this now. This word here, it's indicating this here. You have thoughts. You have thoughts. Memories are thoughts. And you have thoughts now. Some partial reflection of an idea that is thought of as past, that have very little to do with your actual experience as it's happening. We all know this. And this is why when there's an accident, there's 5 different stories about what happened. Or when there's a conversation, there's 10 different stories about what happened and what was felt and what was seen, because it's all a unique perspective anyway. But even the unique perspective that you have is only partially recorded, and you can't. It's not like a snapshot image. It's kind of distorted, and it's a thought, and the thoughts only arise in this present moment. There isn't any other moment but this moment. Now place where we are. There's no movement from this. Yeah, if you hear Papaji speaks this way a lot. No movement. There's no distance. The only distance, the only movement away from it is thought. And it's not really movement, it's thought. It's like we live in a movie theater, and the only way to get out of the movie theater is by watching the screen and watching all of the places you can go to in the universe on the movie screen. But you never leave the theater. You've never left the theater. You are the theater. And you are the screen. And in that sense, you are all the places that arose in the screen. But not that you've ever moved anywhere or that those places actually exist, except as images in the screen. But in the sense that you are in the movie, as far as experiencing it, you're in the movie. To the degree to which you are drawn into the images in the screen, in that way you're the movie. You're in that way. It's like even these words, real, unreal, they're useful pointers, but they actually aren't. Like, don't cling to them too. I mean, the way in which you are really a person is the same way in which, if you watch a really good movie, you really felt moved to tears. I'm sure you've been that. And it felt so amazing. It really did. It really changed you. It did something. But it was nothing ever than images on a screen that you were drawn into. But you can be affected by the movie, and in that sense, you're in the movie. Only in that sense. There's a way in which you're in the movie, in that you can be affected by the movie. And there's a way in which you're never in the movie because it's just images on a screen and you aren't really in it in that way. But see, suffering and pain can happen by this kind of identification with the movie. And so, by exercising your attention, you can stop suffering. You can put your attention in such a place that there isn't suffering. But even if you don't do that and you suffer, who you are never changes. Right? But see, that just to say that that's true, and unless attention is resting in who you are, that's not any kind of consolation. It's not something to fool yourself with. Oh, now I know that I'm not really at, so it's okay. I won't be vigilant, or I won't try to notice, or I won't do self-inquiry. It's fine. I'm not saying you have to do any of these things, but I'm just saying that if we just at an intellectual level go, oh yeah, I got it, I understand it now, I'm actually not moved by it, and if I just keep saying that over and over again, it'll work out. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to bring your attention to what is aware, or bring your attention to the process, the conscious process, in whatever form it takes for you. Different people do it different ways, but you could say what's aware of all of this. And what that does is brings attention to rest in the place that is unmoving and unchanging. And if attention does that enough, it begins to dissolve there and just stays there. So there is like a cost to this. I mean, there is a kind of, if you listen to Papaji with this in mind, you can hear Papaji's always talking about how it's effortless and there's nothing to do and it's your inherent nature. But he's also talking about vigilance and the need to give up every desire. That's a big, tall order. That's not nothing. Because desire is the I thought wanting stuff in what's arising, rather than going, oh, right now, what is? It's not your life that's being lived. You're simply aware of what's being lived. So the one that is desiring is not you, it's the body-mind. What is it that's aware of the one that wants this and wants that and that is all upset? It isn't easy. This is it's easy in the sense that there's no seeking necessary. You just do it and cut it off. That's what Papaji meant by vigilance. It's continuous. And in that way, it's effortless because there's nothing to do but recognize that you aren't the body and you aren't the mind. And the body and the mind has desires and it's doing things and it's working and it's this and it's that. So renouncing the I. Now you might say, well, it's too hard for me. I get too involved. I can't just pull back and say I'm not the I. Even the idea that you have to pull back is problematic. There's really nothing to pull back. It's just recognizing that it's all happening by itself and you're not actually doing it. You don't have any choice. Things are just happening as they happen. They're happening as they happen. They're happening as they arise. So there isn't anything in your hands to do in that sense. That's not always easy to do either, just like that one felt swoop. So you can do it in small ways. And this is something that Ramana Maharshi recommended to people. He said, look, it's not always easy for people to just recognize they're not the doer. So you do it slowly, piece at a time. You say, oh, this whole thing about my job is driving me crazy, or whatever it is that's getting you. And you give it to God. You give it to Ishvara. You say, this is just outside of my hands. This is God's will. God, take it. I mean, really what you're doing is you're giving God your mind. Now, if you're like, well, I don't believe in God, but I believe in Ramana Maharshi, then give Ramana Maharshi your mind. Because it's about surrender. It's not about who you're surrendering it to, really. And you do that little by little, as much as you feel you can. And then you find that you're not thinking about it as much. Because really your life is being lived. You're not living your life. You're being lived. And whether you call it God, or you call it the self, or you call it Brahman, or you call it the goddess, she's living us. And if you relax and know that she's living you, suddenly you're in the witness position. You're the awareness of everything. Because you've given it over.